Alright, this is Champion, Gatekeeper, or Cuddle, Bellator edition, starring Glover Teixeira. When he came into the UFC, everybody thought he was a beast. They thought he was going to be a monster because he trained with Chuck Liddell. He was Chuck Liddell's prospect. They said he was Chuck Liddell 2.0. Great takedown defense. Even better power, better knockout power, better one-punch knockout power. But Glover Teixeira, you know, at the end of the day, this guy will never, ever, ever, ever be a UFC champion. He's too one-dimensional. You cannot be a one-dimensional champion. You can have one-dimensional tactics where you're somebody like Jose Aldo, where you want to be a counter puncher. But you know, when you're behind on the cards, you need to know how to switch gears, and that means you have to have other tools in your toolbox. Glover Teixeira does not have that. You know, he's relying on his big chin. He's relying on his big punching power, and he's relying on his toughness. You can't do that at the top, because then you have a guy like John Jones that'll literally beat the shit out of you. You have a guy like Alexander Gustafsson that literally beat the shit out of him. You had a guy like Anthony Johnson that literally beat the shit out of him. Glover Teixeira will never be a UFC champion. Gatekeeper, no. I'm sorry. He is not a gatekeeper. The gatekeeper of this division is Alexander Gustafsson. It would have been an Anthony Johnson if he was still around. Glover Teixeira is only moving up the ranking so high because of what? Because they lost Phil Davis. They lost Ryan Bader. OSP's coming off of a loss, I believe, or he just got that one win, but he was coming off of a loss. Anthony Johnson retired. John Jones is out on suspension. Glover Teixeira had his position on the rankings because of that. You know, it was by default. He didn't earn a number 2 ranking. He's not that guy. He is not a gatekeeper. A gatekeeper would beat a guy like Phil Davis. A gatekeeper will beat a guy like Anthony Johnson. A gatekeeper will beat a guy like Alexander Gustafsson. A gatekeeper only loses every now and then to the champion and to the number 1 contender. Glover Teixeira can't beat the champion, and he cannot beat the number 1 contenders, and that's why he's not a fucking champion. Look at who he fought before, Jared Kinnear, or whatever the guy's name is. You know, that doesn't even really give him a fight against Alexander Gustafsson. These two guys wanted to fight each other, so they made the fight. I'm not mad at that, but that's just not a legitimate win right there. That's not a legitimate win. Give me 1 second, guys. I have an email coming in. This is from, let's see. Okay, that was one of the OG hitters on deck from the other channel telling me something. You know, unfortunately, guys, everybody can't be the best. Everyone cannot be UFC champion. Everyone cannot be a UFC gatekeeper. So, you know, then we boil down to cut him or Bellator. And there's only one thing that can make me make the decision. It's only one thing, and we all know where I'm going with that. It's about the money. What is Glover Teixeira's salary? Is he making $200,000? Is he making $150,000? If Glover Teixeira is making $1 over, and I don't mean to sound like a hater, because if he has a good contract, good for him. But if Glover Teixeira is making $1 over $80,000 to show up, they need to cut him. They do need to cut him, because he's not worth that. Glover Teixeira is not bringing in any pay-per-view numbers. Glover Teixeira is not going to break any free Big Fox numbers. Glover Teixeira is not going to break any UFC on Fox numbers. With that being said, he's not worth the money. If they let go of Phil Davis, cut Glover. If they let go of Ryan Bader, cut Glover. If they let go of these guys, you have to cut Glover, because Phil Davis is probably a better fighter overall. I understand Glover beat him, but I'm just saying it was a unanimous decision. It just wasn't an entertaining fight. But, you know, I just don't think Glover is worth his paycheck. That's what I'm going to say about it. You know, is he a true fan favorite? No, I don't really believe so. I think that fans warmed up to him because he has some knockouts, but is he a fan favorite? I don't really think so. Does his pay-per-views, does his fights do any numbers at any level? Are those analytics on the rise or are they on the fall? When he fights, does everybody stop what they're doing to watch him? I just don't really believe so. I think tonight was all about Alexander Gustafsson being in his hometown, putting on a hell of a performance, and I think he really exposed Glover Teixeira, and he's looking really bad right now. I would actually cut him and let him go ahead and be a free agent and go do what he needs to do. I wouldn't even let him fight out the rest of his contract, because what's going to happen, he's just going to continue to fight, and he's going to be getting in the way of guys that are legitimate fighters. And you know, you don't want them getting, you don't want every single person on the come up having to fight people like Anthony Johnson, having to fight people like OSP. You know, I'm talking about knockout puncher, and that includes who? Glover Teixeira. You don't want to knock out everybody on the come up with a knockout puncher just because he got lucky and landed one punch. You want these guys on the come up to really have a well-rounded game, and I don't think Glover Teixeira really adds to the UFC's roster, really. That guy doesn't really have a great physique, man. If he wants to go down to 185 to keep his job, I wouldn't be mad at that for 1 second. I would actually be interested to see if he has better movement. Is he going to do anything to change, or does he think that going to 185 would just solve everything? Me personally, I do believe Glover at 185 with a new training camp, man, he could really press the reset button on his career and start over fresh. I don't know what else to say, man. Fuck it, it is what it is. Let me know what you think in the comments.